Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one you overlook. This is the story of Emma Parker, a quiet young woman whose worn jeans and faded sweater hid a truth that would shake an entire company. When she walked into Novatech, the CEO laughed, employees whispered, and security nearly dragged her out. They thought she was a nobody. What they didn't know was that Emma owned the very ground beneath their feet. Where are you watching from today? Because after this story, you'll never judge by appearances again. Emma Parker adjusted her canvas bag as she approached the gleaming lobby of Novatech Industries. Her faded jeans and gray sweater were comfortable and practical, qualities she valued more than appearances. At 24, she had learned that first impressions often revealed more about the observer than the observed. The marble floors reflected morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting geometric patterns across the reception area. The lobby buzzed with the energy of a successful tech company, filled with the quiet confidence that came from steady growth and recent funding success. Madison, the receptionist, looked up from her phone with a practiced smile that quickly shifted when she took in Emma's casual appearance. At 26, Madison had worked her way up from intern to receptionist, taking genuine pride in maintaining Novatech's professional image. She understood that first impressions mattered in the tech world, and part of her job was protecting the company's reputation. "Can I help you?" Madison asked, her tone already cooler than her initial greeting. "I'm here about the custodial position," Emma said simply, her voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone comfortable in their own skin. Madison's eyebrows rose slightly. This wasn't what she'd expected. "Oh, well, let me check on that." She picked up her phone, speaking in hushed tones that weren't quite as quiet as she intended. "Marcus, there's someone here about the cleaning job. Should I send her up?" "What? Okay." She hung up and looked at Emma with what might have been pity mixed with professional obligation. "Mr. Steele will be right down." Marcus Steele emerged from the elevator 3 minutes later with the confident stride of someone who had built a tech company from nothing. At 38, he carried himself with the assurance that came from surviving 2 failed startups and finally building something that mattered. A company with 60 employees, solid revenue growth, and investors who believed in his vision. His tailored suit and expensive watch spoke of recent success, but the tension in his shoulders and the lines around his eyes revealed the constant pressure of running a rapidly growing startup. He'd just come from a particularly brutal board meeting where questions about company culture, employee retention, and leadership development had dominated the agenda. The stress was getting to him, and perhaps that explained what happened next. "You're here about the cleaning position?" he asked, his tone already suggesting this was an unwelcome interruption to his busy schedule. "Yes," Emma replied calmly, meeting his gaze directly. Marcus glanced around the lobby, noting several employees who had gathered near the coffee station, their phones subtly positioned as if sensing something worth recording. The morning had already been challenging. Difficult conversations with investors, pressure from the board, questions about his leadership, and this felt like another problem that needed to be solved quickly and efficiently. "Look, I appreciate you coming in, Bernard," he said, his voice taking on the tone of someone trying to be patient while clearly wanting to move on. "But I'm not sure you understand what we're looking for here. This is a high-end technology facility. We need someone who can maintain our standards, someone who understands the level of professionalism we expect." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "I understand." Something shifted in Marcus's expression. Not malice exactly, but the kind of thoughtless dismissal that comes when someone feels overwhelmed and needs to assert control somewhere, anywhere. The pressure from the board meeting, the questions about his leadership, the constant scrutiny, it all seemed to coalesce into this moment where he felt the need to demonstrate authority. "I don't think you do," he continued, his voice growing more dismissive. This isn't McDonald's. Okay, we're a serious technology company with serious standards. Maybe you should look for something more appropriate to your situation." Madison stifled a laugh, caught up in the moment and her boss's apparent wit. Several employees had their phones out now, some recording openly, others more discreetly, all sensing that something dramatic was unfolding. Emma felt the familiar sting of being judged solely by her appearance, the automatic assumption that casual clothes meant lack of capability or worth. "I see," Emma said, her voice remaining steady despite the public nature of the humiliation. Marcus pulled out his wallet with a flourish and extracted a crisp $100 bill. The gesture wasn't born of malice, but of a misguided attempt to solve what he saw as an awkward situation with money, a habit he'd developed as his wealth grew, believing that cash could smooth over most uncomfortable moments. "Here," he said, holding out the bill with what he probably thought was generosity. "This should help you find something that's a better fit for someone like you." The bill hung in the air between them like a bridge neither could cross back over. Emma looked at it, then at Marcus, then at the growing circle of employees recording every moment of what was becoming a viral incident in real time. "Thank you for your time," she said with quiet dignity. Turning toward the exit without taking the money, the Tesla Model S glided silently through San Francisco's afternoon traffic, its electric motor humming with the same quiet confidence that had defined Emma Parker's entire morning. The leather seats, heated to perfection, cradled her as she processed what had just transpired in the Novatech lobby. She wasn't angry. Anger was too simple an emotion for what she felt. Instead, she experienced the particular clarity that comes when someone reveals their true character without realizing it. The moment when assumptions about power and worth collide with reality in the most spectacular way possible. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call from Victoria Chen, her personal assistant and trusted confidant for the past 2 years. Victoria had started as an overqualified receptionist at a prestigious law firm, undervalued and overlooked until Emma recognized her exceptional organizational abilities and complete discretion regarding sensitive matters. "Victoria," Emma said, her voice carrying through the car's premium sound system with crystal clarity, "I need you to pull the Novatech lease agreement from our Sunrise Holdings portfolio. Focus particularly on the conduct clauses and early termination provisions." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line, the kind of silence that comes when someone is processing information that doesn't quite align with their expectations. Victoria had worked with Emma long enough to recognize the particular tone that meant her employer was moving from passive observation to active engagement. "Of course, Miss Parker," Victoria replied, her voice carrying the professional efficiency that had made her invaluable to Emma's operations. "Shall I prepare a non-renewal notice? The current lease term expires in 8 weeks, and we could have the paperwork ready within hours." Emma's response came after a moment of contemplation, her decision reflecting layers of strategic thinking that went far beyond simple landlord-tenant relationships. "Not yet," she said, her tone suggesting depths of planning that hadn't yet been revealed. "Let's see how they handle this first." Sometimes people reveal their true character when they think no one important is watching. The history between Emma and the Novatech building stretched back 18 months, to a time when her investment strategy had been focused on acquiring premium commercial properties in emerging technology corridors. She had purchased the building for $43 million in cash. The transaction handled through her shell company, Sunrise Holdings, to maintain the privacy that had become essential to her business operations. The sale had been completed with the kind of discretion that serious money could afford. No fanfare, no publicity, just the quiet transfer of ownership that allowed Emma to add another strategic asset to her growing portfolio. Marcus had negotiated Novatech's lease just 6 months later, his annual payment of $2.8 million representing what he considered reasonable terms for securing prime Silicon Valley real estate. Marcus had no idea that his landlord was a woman barely older than some of his senior developers, someone who could have purchased his entire operation with the contents of a single investment account. Emma's extraordinary wealth hadn't materialized from venture capital success or cryptocurrency speculation, though both had contributed to her portfolio's growth. The foundation of her financial empire had been inherited from her grandmother, Margaret Parker, a real estate visionary who had recognized California's potential decades before the tech boom transformed the landscape into a global economic powerhouse. Margaret Parker had built her empire through exceptional market timing, ruthless negotiation skills, and an almost supernatural ability to identify undervalued properties in emerging markets. When she passed away the previous year, she had left Emma not just 12 buildings across California, but also a philosophy that had shaped every subsequent business decision. Money doesn't make you superior to anyone. Margaret had told Emma during one of their final conversations, her weathered hands holding her granddaughters with surprising strength. It simply provides more opportunities to reveal your true character. The question isn't whether you have wealth, but what kind of person you choose to be with it. Those words had resonated deeply with Emma, who had already experienced the darker side of revealing her financial status too early in relationships. She had learned, sometimes through painful betrayals, that announcing her wealth often transformed genuine connections into calculated performances, turning potential friends into opportunistic actors seeking their own advancement. Her Stanford Business School education, completed summa cum laude at 21, remained one of her most closely guarded secrets. The degree represented years of intensive study in finance, economics, and organizational psychology, knowledge that she applied daily in managing her extensive holdings. But she had discovered that mentioning her academic credentials often created more barriers than bridges, leading people to make assumptions about privilege and opportunity that failed to capture the complexity of her actual experience. The security footage from the Novatech building arrived in Emma's email as she sat in her Pacific Heights penthouse office. The high-definition files transmitted instantly from the building's management company to her private server. She watched the morning's events unfold from multiple camera angles, observing not just Marcus's behavior, but the reactions of every employee who had witnessed his performance. The video quality was exceptional, clearly documenting the progression from casual dismissal to deliberate public humiliation. Emma found herself studying the subtle dynamics of power and complicity, noting which employees had seemed uncomfortable with their CEO's conduct and which had actively participated in the collective mockery. These distinctions would matter in the days to come. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call from Janet Walsh, Novatech's Human Resources Director. Emma allowed the call to proceed to voicemail, preferring to hear Janet's unfiltered thoughts when she believed no one important was listening. The message, when it arrived, was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak that managed to avoid any acknowledgement of wrongdoing while simultaneously suggesting that Emma should be grateful for the attention. "Miss Parker," Janet's voice carried the kind of bureaucratic efficiency that has suggested she had delivered similar messages before. "This is Janet Walsh from Novatech Industries. There appears to have been some confusion regarding your interview scheduling today. Our CEO was simply clarifying our standard hiring protocols. If you remain interested in custodial opportunities, please feel free to resubmit your application through our regular channels." What made the message truly revealing was Marcus's voice, clearly audible in the background, dismissing the entire incident with characteristic arrogance. "Just some wannabe looking for attention," he could be heard saying. "Probably thinks she can squeeze some settlement money out of this. These people always have an angle." Janet herself felt genuinely conflicted as she made the call. She'd been with Novatech for 3 years, had watched the company grow from 30 to 60 employees, and genuinely cared about maintaining a positive workplace culture. But she also understood the political realities of working for Marcus, especially when he was under pressure from the board about leadership and company culture issues. Emma saved the voicemail carefully, adding it to what was becoming a comprehensive documentation of Novatech's corporate culture and decision-making processes. But more importantly, it confirmed her initial assessment of Marcus Steele's character and the values that permeated his organization. "Time for a lesson in humility," she murmured to herself, her reflection in the office's floor-to-ceiling windows showing eyes that had hardened with resolve. The revelation, the first email arrived at Novatech at precisely 4 o'clock that afternoon. Its sender identified as Sunrise Holdings Legal Department. The subject line, "Immediate Lease Review, Novatech Industries," was deliberately ambiguous, suggesting routine business while hinting at more serious implications beneath the surface. Marcus, still basking in what he perceived as his morning's successful demonstration of corporate leadership and boundary setting, barely glanced at the message before forwarding it to his assistant with a dismissive note. "Probably routine paperwork," he typed, Handle whatever they need and get back to me only if there's something actually requiring my attention. By 6 o'clock, the second email had arrived. Its tone markedly more formal and its implications impossible to dismiss or delegate. Notice of potential lease violation, discriminatory practices. Commanded attention through its very directness, referencing specific clauses in Novatech's lease agreement that prohibited conduct detrimental to the building's professional atmosphere and reputation. This communication demanded Marcus's personal attention, and as he read through its carefully crafted legal language, he felt the first stirrings of genuine concern. Someone with apparent legal authority was treating the morning's incident as a serious matter with potential contractual consequences that could affect his business operations. His response, shouted across the office with the kind of panic that suggested his usual confidence was beginning to crack, revealed the depth of his ignorance regarding his own company's fundamental business arrangements. "Who the hell is Sunrise Holdings?" he demanded, his voice carrying to every corner of the open plan workspace. The answer, delivered by his visibly nervous finance director, struck him like a physical blow to his understanding of reality. "They're our landlords, sir. They own this building, have owned it for the past 18 months. What followed was the most expensive night in Novatech's corporate history. $25,000 in emergency legal fees spent unraveling layers of corporate structures and privacy protections. Teams of lawyers and private investigators worked through the night, following paper trails that seemed designed to obscure rather than illuminate, tracing ownership through shell companies and trust arrangements that protected the true owner's identity with sophisticated precision. The revelation came at dawn, delivered in a phone call that would haunt Marcus's dreams for years to come. "We found her," his lead attorney announced, exhaustion evident in every syllable. "Emma Parker, 24 years old, Stanford MBA, summa cum laude, estimated net worth $300 million. She owns 12 commercial properties across California, including yours." Marcus felt his entire worldview crumble as the magnitude of his mistake became undeniably clear. "The cleaning lady owns our building," he whispered, his voice barely audible as the impossible truth settled into his consciousness like poison spreading through his bloodstream. The next morning brought Emma back to the Novatech building, wearing precisely the same outfit that had triggered such derision the day before. The gray sweater, the faded jeans, the worn white sneakers remained unchanged, but something fundamental in her bearing had shifted. A subtle confidence that suggested yesterday's humiliation had crystallized into something far more purposeful and potentially dangerous. Madison's reaction bordered on hysteria when she saw Emma approaching the reception desk. "You again?" she practically shrieked, her carefully applied makeup unable to hide the panic in her eyes. "I thought security banned you yesterday. Do I need to call the police?" Emma's smile held depths that Madison couldn't begin to fathom. The serene composure of someone who had been expecting this moment and perhaps even orchestrating it with precise timing. "I have a meeting with Mr. Steele," she said simply, her voice carrying an authority that made Madison's bluster seem suddenly hollow and ineffective. "Yeah, right," Madison laughed, but the sound held no humor and considerable nervousness. "In your dreams, lady, security is going to love this." What Madison couldn't see was the frantic activity taking place on the floors above, where Marcus had been in emergency meetings since 5 o'clock that morning. His legal team had painted a picture so terrifying that he could barely process its implications. Emma Parker could terminate their lease immediately, leaving Novatech with 60 days to vacate a building they couldn't possibly replace in time to maintain their current operations. When Marcus finally appeared in the lobby, his usual commanding presence had been replaced by something that looked dangerously close to desperation. His eyes scanned the marble expanse until they found Emma, still sitting in that same plastic chair, still reading what appeared to be the same paperback book about real estate investment. The recognition hit him like a physical blow, the impossible truth that his brain had been struggling to process finally becoming undeniable reality. Same girl, same clothes, same quiet dignity. But now he knew exactly who she was and what she could do to everything he had built. His approach across the lobby was a study in human vulnerability stripped bare. His hands trembled with the kind of fine motor disruption that comes when the nervous system struggles to process information that challenges every fundamental assumption about reality. Miss Parker. The question emerged as barely more than a whisper. Each syllable weighted with the crushing realization that he had catastrophically misjudged not just a person, but an entire situation that could destroy everything he had spent years building. Emma looked up from her phone with the kind of serene composure that suggested she had been expecting this moment. Her smile held the innocent quality of someone who had done nothing wrong, while simultaneously conveying depths of power that made Marcus's earlier arrogance seem not just foolish, but cosmically insignificant. Yes, she replied, her tone carrying the same gentle courtesy she had shown throughout the previous day's humiliation. The lobby had filled with employees drawn by the magnetic pull of witnessing their invincible CEO reduced to something approaching panic. Phones appeared with the instinctive speed of a generation raised on social media, capturing every moment of what would soon become the most shared corporate confrontation in Silicon Valley history. You, you own this building, Marcus asked, his voice barely audible as the impossible truth settled into his consciousness. Emma's response came with the casual confidence of someone discussing the weather rather than announcing ownership of $43 million worth of prime San Francisco real estate. I do, she said simply, her tone suggesting that this particular building represented merely one small piece of a much larger empire. Did you want to discuss something specific? The devastating question that followed would be replayed millions of times across social media platforms, dissected in business schools, and remembered as the moment when karmic justice was served with surgical precision. I believe you had some opinions about my qualifications yesterday, she said, her voice carrying the kind of calm authority that made his earlier bluster seem not just inappropriate, but actively embarrassing. You mentioned something about finding my place in the world. The pause that followed allowed the full implications of her statement to settle over the assembled crowd like a blanket of uncomfortable truth. Tell me, Mr. Steele, where exactly is your place? Marcus's desperate attempt at damage control began with the kind of frantic backpedaling that only occurs when someone realizes they have stepped off a cliff and are currently in freefall. There's been a terrible misunderstanding, he stammered, his voice carrying the particular strain that comes from trying to undo something that has already been permanently recorded for posterity. Emma's response demonstrated the kind of intellectual precision that had earned her a summa cum laude degree from Stanford Business School. Oh, she asked, her tone suggesting genuine curiosity about which specific aspect of his behavior he considered misunderstood. Which part was misunderstood exactly? The part where you suggested I belonged at McDonald's? Or perhaps when you offered me a $100 bill like I was some kind of street beggar? Videos began appearing on social media within minutes, as viewers around the world witnessed what happens when assumed power meets actual authority. Emma continued speaking in conversational tones that carried clearly across the marble expanse. I came here yesterday for a simple reason, she said, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had spent considerable time thinking about the philosophical implications of wealth, power, and human dignity. I wanted to see how my tenants treat people they consider beneath them. She paused, allowing the implications to settle over the assembled crowd. Congratulations, Mr. Steele, you failed spectacularly. Emma produced a copy of Novatech's lease agreement from her simple canvas bag, the document representing the legal foundation upon which Marcus's entire corporate empire rested. 60-day termination clause, she noted, her finger tracing the relevant section with casual precision. Discriminatory behavior violates Section 12.3. Marcus's face drained of color as the magnitude of his situation crystallized into sharp focus. His company's recent funding round, his employees' livelihoods, his own reputation and financial future, all hung in the balance of a decision that rested entirely with the woman he had publicly humiliated less than 24 hours earlier. Miss Parker, please, he pleaded, his voice carrying the desperate quality of someone watching their life's work crumble in real time. Let's discuss this reasonably. Emia's response carried the weight of someone who had given considerable thought to the concept of reasonable discourse and found his previous behavior wanting. The time for reasonable discussion was yesterday, she said simply, before you decided that public humiliation was an appropriate way to treat someone seeking honest employment. The damage was already spreading: viral videos, emergency board calls, investor concerns about leadership judgment. But Emma's offer came with the precision of someone who understood that true power lay not in destruction, but in the opportunity to create meaningful change. "I'll give you two options," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who held all the cards in a game that Marcus was only beginning to understand he had been playing. Option 1, find a new building in 60 days. Option 2, prove that this company can change. Marcus's answer came with the desperate sincerity of someone who had suddenly realized that everything he valued could disappear with a single signature on a legal document. "Anything," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "Absolutely anything." The terms Emma outlined would reshape not just Novatech's corporate culture, but Marcus's understanding of what it meant to wield authority responsibly. Comprehensive diversity training for all employees, inclusive hiring practices with accountability measures, and a complete review of company culture and management behavior. Within 6 months, Novatech had become a model for workplace inclusivity. Its transformation so complete that Harvard Business School would eventually create a case study around the incident. Madison, witnessing the transformation firsthand, approached Emma during a follow-up visit months later. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice carrying genuine remorse and hard-won self-awareness. "I judged you before I even knew you. I was so focused on protecting what I thought was the company's image that I forgot basic human decency." "You judged me because you thought I was powerless," Emma replied gently, without anger or condescension. "That says more about the environment here than about you personally. The question is what you do with that realization." Even Janet Walsh, initially defensive about the company's response to the incident, eventually acknowledged that the confrontation had revealed systemic problems that they'd been willfully ignoring. "We thought we were protecting the company," she admitted to Emma months later, during a comprehensive culture review session. "But we were really protecting our own assumptions and biases." Marcus found himself reflecting deeply on the pressure and stress that had led to his poor judgment and public humiliation of another human being. "I was overwhelmed, frustrated from a difficult board meeting, and I took it out on someone I thought couldn't fight back," he told his leadership team during a company-wide culture review. "That's not leadership. That's cowardice disguised as authority." The story spread through Silicon Valley not as a tale of revenge or corporate warfare, but as a powerful reminder that respect isn't something people have to earn through titles, wealth, or social status. It's something we reveal about ourselves through how we treat others, especially when we think no one important is watching. Emma's philosophy proved itself through action rather than words. True power isn't about what you own or control, but about who you choose to be with whatever authority you possess. Emma Parker taught us something that day. Real power isn't about money or status. It's about how you treat people when you think no one's watching. In a world that rewards ego and appearance, she chose humility. Marcus thought he was above her, but in the end, he realized the real cost of his mistake wasn't financial. It was human. That nobody he overlooked. She turned out to be someone who changed everything. The next time you meet someone who seems unimportant, ask yourself, are you really seeing them or just their title, their clothes, their silence? Raw. Respect isn't something people have to earn. It's something you reveal about yourself. Who are you when you think no one important is watching? That's who you really are.